We're only a couple of weeks away from the Paralympics, and we decided here on Off the Podium to celebrate the occasion by bringing on a couple of Paralympic legends to learn about their amazing careers in the lead-up to the Paris Paralympics. And what a way to start when we get on the show the most decorated Canadian Paralympian of all time across three Paralympics in 1984, 1988 and 1992. Won an astonishing 21 medals, 18 of them gold if you don't mind. That's a strike rate of 85%, which I'm saying right now is better than Michael Phelps' strike rate. So just going to put that out there into the universe. And outside of his career has gone on to some fantastic things outside of the sport, was involved in the 1994 Commonwealth Games, has been inducted into so many Hall of Fames that I've lost count, and is a true icon of the Paralympics anywhere in the world, let's be honest. It's a pleasure to welcome off the podium Michael Edgson. Michael, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you on today.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for reaching out. I'm excited, elated that you had sent me a communication, and I've been waiting since we first got in contact. So I'm excited to be here and looking forward to a great conversation. Well,
I hope we can make it a great conversation, because the one thing actually I want to touch on in my introduction there, I say 21 medals, 18 gold, 3 silver. But when I look you up, some places say you only won 17 gold medals. Like, I mean, is it 18 or 17? Can we confirm that? Because I couldn't seemingly get a concrete answer on the different things I was researching.
So this has been a point of contention for a long time. I know what I did in 92. I know what I did in 1988. It's in 1984, so that's a little suspect. I don't have my medals with me, most of them any longer. They're spread out in the country in different halls, so I can't even gather them up and count. Before we came on this afternoon, I actually went reading through literature trying to count. So it's I don't want to be called arrogant, but I think it's 18, yet I don't have them all in front of me to count them.
I've got to ask, how do you not know? Like, I don't know. Is that because 84 was such, like, I mean, obviously with the Paralympics, it wasn't sort of aligned with the Olympics until 88. I mean, does it come into that, or is there something else about it?
Okay, so we're going to peel back the onion, are we?
Oh, yeah, please. Let's right. Get into the layers, deep into it.
Okay, we're getting into it. Truth be known is every race comes and goes, and as one ends, the next one begins, and I don't dwell on that rear view mirror looking behind me. So I would have swam, I would have gone on to the next race, I would have swam, would have gone next race. As games come and go, after 84, you take a little bit of time to wind down, you start getting training, you start ramping up for 88. You actually forget what went on in 84. And after 88, again, I remember sitting on an airplane coming home and thinking about what's next. I'm going to keep going, am I not? And all of a sudden you forget what happened in 88. You focus on 92. So the truth of the matter is, once I'm done, and I move on and I keep looking forward. I literally haven't gone back to try to source and count. For the longest time, I had a cardboard box of medals that sat in our shed. And it wasn't until about 10 years ago that my wife said, hey, we need to get them inside the house in case the shed ever floods. So literally they're in plastic bags stored somewhere in the house. And I've only got 2 that I keep close to me.
Wow. But I've got to ask though the question though, outside of, I totally get what you're saying, but is there not like official statistics or records that were kept where it's almost like, it's not up to you to count them, it's sort of just in the history books that we can sort of have that official, you've won 17, you've won 18.
Yeah, and you know, there's a book that was published called The Road to Glory, the 1984 Games. Mm-hmm. And in the back of that book is a set of results. I don't know if anyone's ever gone back to look and count.
Right.
So quite honestly, I remember 2 races. I remember a few more, but 2 particular, and they weren't back in 84. 84 was the first time I'd ever traveled internationally. I was a kid. It was exciting. And I was just in awe just being in the group of people I was with.
Wow. I kind of want to, like, I love the fact that you've won so much. It's almost just like, oh, it's one of them. Like, it's kind of, but at the same time, I totally get the way you kind of explain it. But I found that fact fascinating in researching that there can be almost like a question of, was it 17? Was it 18? We'll go with 18. We like that, obviously, with that, Michael. But it's kind. You know, and that strike rate, as I said, 85% gold to Michael Phelps, 82%. So you're better than Phelps. So
Thank you. I'll hang on to that.
I know it's hard to fully accept that, but I'll take that for you out there. But we were talking a little bit off air, sort of where you grew up, born in Vancouver, but moved to Nanaimo, if I'm not mistaken, on Vancouver Island, home of the Nanaimo Bar. I know Jared, one of our co-hosts, is a big fan of the Nanaimo Bar, but just tell me a little bit about growing up in Nanaimo, because I've visited there a few times. Obviously a small town, but it's still a nice area, a nice part of the country, and a lot's going on there still in Nanaimo.
Nanaimo is a little below midway on Vancouver Island, and Vancouver Island is a huge island. It fits just inside the Great Lakes or Lake Superior. The town I grew up in was about 50,000 people. I'd moved there when I was about 4, I think, and was there until the end of high school. We'd moved around a couple different places and then back to Nanaimo again. It was a great town. You knew the people, you knew the business owners. There was one winter swim club, one summer swim club. Hockey was the big sport. Certainly, it was a mill town. So the main employer was a mill that made, I got to get this right, my dad ran the mill, so I got to remember what it does. There was a pulp mill. But it was a great town. It was friendly. It's known for the capital of Hells Angels, which is a world-renowned motorcycle gang. And every summer, that's where they would come in and get together. They have their annual conference. It had the bathtub race where people would literally sit in little bathtubs with a 9.9 engine on the back and race from Nanaimo clear across the strait to Vancouver.
Wow.
There were some crazy things that went on, but it was a great town to grow up in.
I didn't know that about the Hells Angels. I thought it was just renowned for the bars. I didn't realize that there was a home of the Hells Angels. Didn't know that.
Angel Acres is a little just south of Nanaimo is where I believe the main clubhouse is.
Right. There you go. Things you learn on this podcast. You touch on, obviously, hockey. I know you sort of grew up playing hockey, soccer. You tried your hand at gymnastics, of course, too. But obviously with your disability, your sort of visual impairment, that made it difficult. So what then led to swimming? Was it kind of something that when you gave that a try, you're able to, I guess, go into that a little bit differently to the other sports that you were playing?
Yeah, and I've got to go back. I had a pair of skates and a hockey stick. I say I played hockey, and if you talk to my family or anyone else, they're saying, no, you didn't. You were 5 and you fell over. So, kind
of like as an Australian, I can claim I'm a swimmer because we all swim, but I'm not an Olympian, right? So it's kind of a similar thing. Gotcha.
So gymnastics was kind of the last sport I did before getting into the pool. And quite honestly, a little bit of arthritis growing up, the joints and the knees and the elbows weren't going to handle it. I have virtually no depth perception. So running at the vault was going to end up being a little bit of a challenge, or trying to do flips and grab the high bar on the way down probably wasn't going to work for me. The pool, as I love the water, I love to swim, was a safe environment for a kid to get rid of energy. And I started late. I didn't start competitive swimming until I was 13 years old, 12, somewhere in there. But it was a sport my folks could drop me off at. I could hit the pool. I wasn't going to be in danger. The worst I could do was hit the end of the pool, which wasn't going to hurt me. I loved it, and I could thrive. As much as you train as a team, you compete individually. So I wasn't trying to catch a ball, kick a ball. It was one of those sports you can do with low vision or a visual impairment or totally blind, and it's okay.
And the thing I've always loved about when we get, say, Canadian swimmers on this show is that obviously I come from a country where, all jokes aside, we literally are swimming from a very, very young age. It's ingrained in our culture and obviously one of our most prominent Olympic sports. But different for Canada, it's sort of much more of a winter-based country. So are there lots of growing up, do you still do learn to swim lessons, kind of all those sort of swimming things that maybe we're very used to here in Australia, or is that sort of a lot different in Canadian culture?
I would say it's probably a little bit different, is you learn to skate. Everybody learns to skate on ice. If you are inland, so you're not on the coast, you may not swim. And there'll be lakes. The swimming pool might be where you go to for a birthday party. And back in the 70s, that would have been at a hotel where you could pay for kids to go in. But the swimming is not the main activity. The other is soccer. because we can play or American soccer, because we can play all year round. Out on the West Coast, as you'll be well aware, we don't get very much snow, contrary to everybody else's belief. So soccer was a sport and hockey was a sport, and those were the two main ones growing up.
I loved that living in Victoria, that it was kind of the summer hotbeds. A lot of summer sports are obviously, their headquarters are based in that part of the country, but I loved it when it would snow, because I was always told, oh, it never snows in Victoria, but it did. But then I would send pictures to my co-host Colin, we're talking off air, based in Winnipeg, and he'd just laugh. I'm like, that's not snow. That's like 5 minutes for me. It's like this deep, and he's like, that's just on my, car right now. What are you talking about?
To put it in perspective, we have a neighbor here where we live that when it snows, he goes and puts the lawn sprinkler on because it's going to be warm enough. The other one is when you can shovel your snow off your driveway with a broom because it's so light you can sweep. It doesn't count as snow. Where Colin in Winnipeg, very different story.
That's where you play Spot the Aussie. I'm the only one walking around going, wow, this is amazing. I love it. And everyone's looking at me going, shut up, go inside.
Enough of this. We don't want it. Hey, where I live, it rains. And it doesn't rain as much as we complain about. It is gray a lot of the time. But you get used to it.
When it came to your sort of progression in the pool, I often ask swimmers, why did you choose a stroke you do? Because often, you're more prominent in the freestyle, the breaststroke, the backstroke, whatever it is. You obviously won a large portion of your medals in freestyle, but you still won medals in butterfly. You still won medals in the individual medley, in backstroke. Like, were you just kind of like an all-rounder? Was it sort of a case of I liked all the strokes, or it just kind of happened a different way?
No, breaststroke is not a stroke that I think should ever be swam. It is the hardest stroke to do. I feel uncoordinated. It hampered my IM. It was a challenge like you wouldn't believe. Pulled groin back in 1984. It's just, I don't know why anybody would swim breaststroke other than it's in the IM. I competed internationally, able-bodied as well as a para swimmer, both. And 200 butterfly was my stroke. I was too small for the 100 at a whopping 5'5.5". Those monsters, they dive in their head. So 200 butterfly by far was my best event. And from there, probably 100, 200 backstroke would have been next. 100 fly was okay, but I was small.
It's fascinating to hear that, because it's sort of, I can look at, say, a butterfly and a freestyle, and this is, again, a non-swimmer, very untechnical, but I would look at them as more similar than butterfly and backstroke. So it's interesting to hear that kind of those two were sort of the ones that you were, I guess, best and liked the most.
Yeah. And you think when you're growing up, backstroke's easy because you can breathe. You're not worried.
That was my favorite. I always loved backstroke when I swam.
Yeah, you can blow bubbles and keep your arms going. And butterfly is one of those strokes that everybody at a young age gets scared of.
Yeah, I never did it. Never did butterfly. Yeah.
It's a knack. Once you figure out the knack and where to get your shoulders and drive your hips down, butterfly's not difficult. Again, I find breaststroke way more taxing than fly.
Interesting.
And the other is training fly. I swam with guys that could swim 200 fly after 200 fly after 200 fly. I was hard pressed to go more than 50 at a time, but I could put it together when I came to race time.
I always say my peak achievement in my very brief swimming career, Michael, subtle brag here, of course, was I did get third place in a high school swimming race in the 25-meter backstroke. There may have only been 3 swimmers in the race, but I still got a bronze medal. So
you got a bronze medal. Medal's a medal. Yep.
Exactly. We just ignore the fact that it was last, but
you can only go up and get better. Those other folks are probably coming down.
Exactly. The rest were scared. That's why they didn't go in the race. They were like, "Oh no, I'm not going up against him." So that's how it worked. It's interesting reading about you, and obviously you just sort of alluded to then when you go up against able-bodied swimmers. How did you compare? And sort of back then, what was the perception around the differences between able-bodied, Paralympic? Was there much of a difference in terms of scenes, or did you really have no opportunities? You kind of had to swim against able-bodied because there maybe wasn't what we have today.
It depends how far back we go. It was very, very separate. There was the para group that swam. And again, realistically, for visually impaired, it was a safe athletic environment. So every kid then that was blind or visually impaired went into the pool because they put a bunch of kids in there. It was okay. I swam able bottom my whole life. I only got into the para in kind of every 2 years when there was an international trip or I could go and represent the country. So in the early days, I swam, and I say I swam against. In reality, I swam the same events nationally as Victor Davis, Alex Bauman, Ann Ottenbright was a female breaststroker back in the early days. Those were the people I swam. And then when they were years ahead of me, I competed against Tewksbury, Sandy Goss, Tom Ponting. And again, they were in a different league than I was at that time. Absolutely. But those were the people, John Kelly, the 200 flyer, 400 Imer, those are the people I swam against. The para athletes, there was only a few of us, but we were woven in seamlessly. And it's not that we were hidden. It just didn't matter, because if you were fast enough to be there, you were fast enough to be there.
I mean, on that, given where we are today in society, I mean, can you compare it? Like, you sort of the way you say that, you're just almost integrated into it like it's not even a question. It doesn't matter whether you're able, disabled, impaired, not impaired. Whereas today, given that it's so, I guess, separated, is it almost better back then that you're just all together?
I say it's a better. I would think that if a para swimmer could compete, and again, I can talk visual impairment. Amputees is a little bit of a different story because there's stroke judges and turn judges. And if you have one hand, conceivably, you can't do two hand touches. I would say we all strive to compete at the top of the echelon that we can. So if I could have gone to the Olympics and if I was fast enough, I would have been there, never looked elsewhere. I wasn't fast enough to make the Canadian Olympic team. I was fast enough to make the Canadian Paralympic team. And it wasn't that I wasn't part of a group or another group, is I swam to my ability. And so was it better? It was different. I would offer that we don't want to integrate the two. Rick Hansen, who most people know of Rick, at one point he and I were going back and forth in the media as he was looking to say, let's integrate the Paralympics and the Olympics. And I had said, logistically, we just can't do that. There isn't a city, a town, a volunteer base that's going to support a 6, 7, 8-week games.
Yeah.
Also, then they started saying, well, let's take the glamour events from the paras and put in the Olympics, the wheelchair marathon, the wheelchair 400s, some of those events. And what it does is it takes those spectacular events, those real, kind of like the men's 100-meter dash or the women's 100-meter dash. When you take that out, it elevates the Olympics and drops down the other. We don't want to do that. Yeah. So if you're fast enough and you can go, you go to Worlds, you go to the Olympics, if you have the ability to get there based on time or speed.
Completely agree. And I'm pretty sure it was at Atlanta, and I think Sydney did it too, where they almost had exhibition events because I remember great Australian wheelchair racer Louise Savage. I'm pretty sure Sydney did it because I remember her being in Stadium Australia. And I know they do it in the Commonwealth Games, of course. They're for medal events. They obviously integrate it. But I think the thing that I love about the Paralympics, Michael, and on many levels that I love about the Paralympics is seeing just the incredible achievements of all the athletes and the diversity. Like, you don't just have the men's 100 meters. You've got countless categories. Like in swimming, like your category is going to be completely different to another 100-meter butterfly category. And that's what's so amazing to see. You can't just put you in a pool with somebody who's missing a limb and expect it to be the same. Like, it's just, and that's the beauty of watching a 2-week festival for Paralympians.
Well, it's been interesting. Canadian swimming trials that we just had for the paras and the Olympics. The para athletes it's one trials. They're in the pool. They're swimming a final because we don't have a depth. We don't have 36 S11s or S12s or different categories. You're going to swim and then we're going to rank the finals, and it's a heat or two. So you may have at trials an athlete with an amputee and an athlete with a visual impairment, all based on time. But you're racing. And when you get in the pool, it's all about the race, not about how many limbs are on the guy next to you.
It's all that competitive nature, which during sort of those early days when you're progressing and you're aiming to get to the Olympics, like, what point does somebody say to you, okay, Michael, your times aren't going to be good enough for the Olympics, but you're kicking ass for the Paralympics? Like, do you get a conversation, or are you sort of aware of the two different times that you've got to achieve for both, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think I would like to say there's such a dichotomy, and there are two different streams and two different emphasis. The parenting I had and the coaching I had, I was an athlete, full stop. I was a swimmer, stop. So there was never a point where, hey, you're not going to make it here, but we could do this. It wasn't a secondary. It's at the speed you're swimming, these are the avenues. And again, I swam interchangeably. Our Canada Cups, our international events, able-bodied, I went to because I made the cut and the times, and off I'd go. Hey, there's a para meet, a trials, there's worlds, there's the Paralympic Games. Well, I just deviated my training schedule to go and compete there. So there wasn't really a fork in the road I had to take. The coaches took me under their wing. I trained with everybody else. I fortunately could fit into the university program at the University of Victoria. I didn't have to have my lane. I could swim with the other athletes. And the weight training, everything else, it was all the same.
Was it like it is today? You're a full-time athlete, or are you sort of working side by side back then, sort of in sort of parallel with what you're doing with your athletic career?
Yeah, I was a full-time student. I might have had a little bit of a 5-year degree, not a 4-year degree. It took me a little while. I tell everybody it's because I went to Korea in the fall of '88. Truth be known is I needed that time off. But no, you're a full-time student, you're swimming university. Prior to '92, I was wrapping up my degree. I'd gotten married in June and then went a couple months later. So after the marriage was our honeymoon. So I was transitioning and really turning that page to the next chapter, where the pool was certainly winding down and life, a whole new kind of journey was starting for me.
Because you were still very young in Barcelona, 23, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
I mean, I'm sort of jumping ahead here. I'm skipping over a lot of the stuff I want to talk about, but why not Atlanta? Why not Sydney? I mean, you're so young, 23, you're still a kid.
But back then, it wasn't. Swimmers were done. Women were done at 18, 19. Men were done at 23, 24. Finished university, got married, was starting a job. It was one of those that it was time. The other thing, and I'd love to know this when you talk to the other athletes, is ideally you stop swimming at the pinnacle. At the very top, when you're the very fastest, that is when you pack it in. The challenge is you don't know when that is, because if you're climbing and you stop before you crest, you don't know if you're at the top or not. For me, I'd started to crest, just a smidge. So from my mind, if I wasn't going to get faster, it was time to be done. And I was confident in '92. A couple things transpired and happened that said to me, it's time.
I think the thing on that is, while you obviously don't really fully know when your peak is or anything along those lines, I guess there's also that mental aspect though, Michael, isn't it? Because as we often hear on this show, with any Olympics or Paralympics, it's that drive to want to do everything again for another 4 years. You're not, like, if you were a hockey player in the Stanley Cup, you lose the Stanley Cup finals, you dust yourself off a couple of months later, you're back on the ice and you give another crack that year. Whereas if you're an Olympian, you miss out on what you were trying to achieve. You got to wait another 4 years. So it's also that drive, I can imagine, really, you've got to think about that after each 4-year cycle.
I was sitting on an airplane coming home from Seoul in '88. Young, well, I was 19. I had a good meet. I'd had a decent swim meet.
It was okay. 9 gold medal. I mean,
it was good.
Could have been 10, let's be honest. But, 9's all right.
Well, it was 9 for 9. I got to pack the flag at closing ceremonies. Packing the flag at opening ceremonies is kind of the curse. Closing ceremonies is a celebration. But I'm sitting on the airplane and I said to myself, what is next? 19 years old. I've kind of done everything I'd set out to do. My folks traveled to Korea. I got to carry the flag. I was coming home. At that point, media was picking up the paras. It was a different time. And I really had to retrench and decide, did I want to keep on going? I was heading into university, or I'd already started. I was going back for my second year. And I had thought, why wouldn't I? There's my family, there's my swimming, and then there's the rest of the world. And I wasn't ready for the rest of the world yet. I was really good with my family and my swimming. So I knew I was going to be in for at least another couple of years. And once you're 2 years in, you might as well keep going.
Yeah, halfway there, right? In the words of a great man, you're halfway there.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to hear that, and I want to cycle back then to '84 because a couple of things on that. You're only 15. You basically are making national teams very quickly after getting into the sport and sort of focusing on it. But the unique thing about the '84 Paralympics, that was the last time that it wasn't held in correlation with the Olympics. This, for many people who maybe aren't familiar with it, in '84, it was actually held in New York and in the UK. So, I mean, looking back on it and to seeing where we've come, I mean, what was that experience like going to a Paralympics that I can imagine wasn't getting the attention it gets today because it's obviously not side by side with the Olympics?
Well, it's interesting is the Paralympics, my understanding is we don't want to go first because we don't want to be a test event. So the Paralympics are after the Olympics. And part of it, we say they're the Paralympic test event, make sure everything still works right.
I wanted to start this interview by saying, well, we've gotten the Olympics over with. Let's get to the real ones now, the Paralympics. Right? I didn't want to disrespect those guys, but we know it's the truth, Michael. Come on.
Well, it's when we get going, and New York was my first international event. I had no idea what we were getting into. I was young. I was naive. Most of the athletes were 5 to 10 years older than me. It was a huge Canadian contingent. And I was just this fish out of water walking around with my eyes wide open. It wasn't lacking for anything because it was more than what I'd ever experienced. The big transition was in '88. So '84, we're at Hofstra University, just outside of New York. We've done our thing, and it was absolutely extraordinary as a life experience. And the introduction to the swimming, the different disabilities, the speed, it was just mind blowing. And part of that I think was good because I was so naive, I could stay focused and not get wrapped up in it all. But between '84 and '88, oh my goodness, did everything ever change?
It's just such a fascinating period for the Paralympics in that area because, I mean, what we're about to see in Paris is just, it's improved so much since Tokyo. Like every cycle we see it. And I know here in Australia, for example, we've got a new broadcaster, Channel 9 is showing the Olympics and the Paralympics, and the level of basically parity that they give the Paralympics to the Olympics is fantastic. And it's the improvements. But I mean, we've had Paralympians on this show, you know, as far back competing in Sydney, and I thought at the time in Australia that was a massive deal and how far they'd come. But now Paralympians sort of look back in Sydney and go, yeah, we actually weren't that far advanced back then. So it's incredible that even then to what you're talking about in that period, which do you also feel that then when you go to Seoul versus New York, when they've just hosted the fake Olympics and then they get to the real Olympics and that it's kind of that vibe, the city, like it's a different feeling to what you would have felt in New York and you're obviously in New York, not the UK, but you know where I'm going with that.
Yeah, you go in and it's in '88. It's in Korea, very different culture to what us Westerners are used to.
Yeah.
And there's armed guards, there's fences, there's security to go through, and we're like, all right, we're getting the big time here. There was scandal. And as soon as parasport had scandal, we knew we had made it. And I've got to be careful how I say that. But when there are doping violations or residency or things like that, it's like, and the media is capturing that, we're celebrating because it matters. We've gotten off page 2.
Yeah.
Where, parasport is not sick kids and it's not cancer. We're not a charity, we're sport. And that transition started right through '88 into '92 and then kept building from there. In 1988, some countries were paying para athletes for medals.
Wow. We're still fighting that in. I know in Australia we're still fighting for it to get them equal payment to what they get with the Olympics, and a lot of countries fighting for it too. But it's amazing to think that was actually happening by some countries back then in '88, though.
In 1984, so in the Canadian sports system, we have carded athletes, and depending, your top 8, top 16 in the world, I believe I was the first carded athlete with a disability in Canada based on para rankings.
Wow.
And that was in 1984.
Wow. Far out.
So we were a long way. Swimming Canada, and I tip my hat to them. They had incorporated the para athletes with the able-bodied, or however you want to call them. We were fully integrated back in the 80s,
Wow.
and the expectations and the coaching. So it wasn't. No, there are some challenges with the different classifications. The more mobile one is, and I was pretty mobile, the easier off we have it. I don't need my own lane. I don't need really anything special to go on. Where if you have athletes that are moving at a slower pace, and there's only one or two in a club, if you need a dedicated coach, things like that do start to affect the training environment. But I was so fortunate; I had it made. It was phenomenal.
Yeah, the thing that I loved so many things I love about living in Canada, but learning a lot about certain athletes and people in your country that I may not have been familiar with before I moved there, but had a lot of respect and learning all the history around someone like Terry Fox, who I guess outside of Canada, maybe a lot of people maybe aren't familiar with him, but I mean, he's up there with Gretzky in terms of one of, the most revered Canadians of all time. And I loved the, even Victoria, obviously, sort of, the tributes to him there before he started and everything. But like, it's just fascinating to learn that sort of history that Canada has with everything related to para sports.
I mean, you look at, if you look at some of the great Canadian athletes all time, Terry Fox is a great human being. And what he did for the movement and the research and cancer and really cancer sport. Wayne Gretzky. I've had a couple of opportunities to be in the room and have conversations with Wayne. His dad, Walter, bless him, he's passed away, a fantastic man. But Wayne is still revered as one of the greatest Canadians to walk the earth. We've got so many, and a lot of them hockey players, but not all of them. Silke Laumann, talk about a story of rowing and the accident. You have a female training with the men's 8 team up in Kamloops. Like there are some Arnie Bolt. Arnie Bolt is someone worth looking up. He was a one-legged high jumper back in and around 1976. And if I hope I've got my details right, he was high jumping in and around 6 feet on one leg. So you can imagine him jumping up or bouncing up and then jumping over. And what I have heard is that he was disqualified for competing at the Olympics, not the Paras, the Olympics, because he had an unfair advantage. He only had one leg to pull over the bar.
Wow.
Now put that in perspective.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Incredibly crazy.
Yeah, but talk about integration. There it is.
Wow. We've got in a couple of weeks a special episode on George Iser, the American gymnast who 6 medals in a day on one leg in gymnastics in 1904. But it's sort of inspirational stories that you hear and kind of everything along those lines. It's fascinating to think, throughout history, what so many people have achieved over the years with everything.
Now, if I may, and if I'm hijacking your script at all,
you're welcome to, Michael. If anybody can, you can. It's all good.
All right. You're very kind. So I spent some time with Walter Gretzky, Wayne's dad, and I remember being back in our hometown, Brantford. And my children will shoot me when they watch this because I tell the stories too much, but I'm proud of it. So I'm sitting on the pool deck. Mr. Gretzky's beside me. We're having a chat. And it was nationals. I'm swimming decently well. I'm ready to go. And I remember he put his arm on my shoulder and he said, "Son." Well, nobody ever likes the expression son. I said, "Yes, Mr. Gretzky." He says, "Those who are truly great don't tell anyone." I'm like, "They don't tell anyone." So yeah, those that are truly great don't need to say anything to anyone. I'm curious with the Canadians that you talk to. Yeah, I'll take care of it. The Canadians that you talk to, are they humble people? Are they proud? Is there a sense of almost arrogance? What is the demeanor? And is it really different than any other country? Or is it most athletes?
I'll say this. I'll start by saying I'm glad you asked me this when it's just me and that Colin's not here. And that's not to take away from Colin, because I'm sad that Colin's not here. But I think by having an Australian and a Canadian here, so I can answer this, I 99% of the time, Canadians live up to the stereotypes. There's a reason why you guys are perceived as maybe the nicest country on the planet, because it's in your culture, it's embedded into it. And I think that people are incredibly humble with their success. I mean, we've had Penny Alexiak on the show, your most decorated Olympian, of course. And, you would expect someone like that to be, yeah, I'm so good, I'm this and that sort of stuff, but very humble. Like, she barely even knew where her medals were. She just kind of moved on to the next thing and just did that. I mean, we've had Donovan Bailey on a couple of times, and he's obviously a bit known for being a bit brash, bit out there and everything, but he puts that down to the Jamaican in him, not the Canadian. So no, I think for the most part, very humble with the achievements. And I think, yeah, Michael, you all live up to your stereotypes, and it's sort of, it's a good thing. And I think it's great whenever we get sort of people on the show, and not just the medalists too, I'll say. Obviously, the levels of success that any athlete can achieve without necessarily having medals, it's obviously very humble in the way they talk about it.
It's interesting you said 99% of the time the story roots out of Gretzky, who, if you know your hockey player's number was 99.
Hey, maybe I did that deliberately to get you to
I'm there. I'm
put that,
impressed.
to put that fact. I actually, when Mr. Gretzky, I love how you call him that, because he was basically Canada's dad, wasn't he? Because I think I had just left after he'd passed, but I remember that sense of mourning that was coming from Canada when he passed away, and that to me just signifies, how great a person is revered in your country when you mourn the death of a parent of them almost as highly as you would them. So, yeah, like it was incredible. We had that in Australia fairly recently when our great cricketer Shane Warne passed away. That was up there on levels if Wayne Gretzky was to pass away. Like it's that level of mourning.
I think sport, and I stole this line, but I like it. Sport is what brings us together and allows us to cheer. Mm-hmm. It creates that excitement, that team, that camaraderie. It's woven into the moral fabric of a country like Australia, like Canada. We're proud to be athletic. We're proud to be active, and sport just brings everybody together.
It's that real almost sense of national pride that you don't get with anything else. Because I think if you were to think about some of the great sort of nation-building moments, like famously in Australia in the 80s, we won the America's Cup. And the first country to ever beat the United States, and revered as one of our most proudest achievements in a fairly young country in the 1980s. If you look into the history of Australia, we've only really been federated 1901, so very young sort of in that period. But then you look at other subsequent events in our country, and I look at Canada, and we recently had a question on one of our news episodes: what event do you wish you could go back in time to witness in person at the Olympic Games? One of mine was Vancouver 2010, and seeing Sidney Crosby get that golden goal to win the gold medal, and just to be there to experience that, because everybody I've talked to from Canada who was witnessing that day, I mean, you still have a smile as soon as I mention it right now, right? And how that brought the country together in that one moment.
Do you remember Montgomery?
Yes, absolutely.
Out of Winnipeg?
Yeah.
Walking through Whistler with a stein of beer.
Been on this show. We've absolutely had him on this show. So we're big fans of John. So, yeah.
But it was interesting. I was with the Paralympic committee at the time of 2010. And the difference in the feel in Whistler, and it was a few different, but Whistler was the main one, between the Olympics and the Paralympics. It was almost a completely different environment, particularly through the lens of the volunteers.
Why was that? Why was that, do you think?
And again, I've got to be mindful a little bit. I think it's the difference of the IOC and the IPC. So the International Olympic Committee and the Paralympic Committee, the IOC is so rigid. I was going to say controlling, but I want to be respectful. So rigid on the requirements, where the Paralympics are all about the sport, and there is media and sponsorship and all the rest, but it is absolutely athlete first. And I don't necessarily think the Olympics are. When you strip it all back, it is about, because without the athletes, we don't have the games. Without sponsors, we can still have games. But it was just, I think the hangover of the Olympics had gone through. People were fatigued, and they got just reinvigorated. And it was an exciting time. It was a time to celebrate and to party and to watch athletic prowess on display. versus, did this country beat that country? It was how fast, how far, how strong can these people be?
And I remember that about Sydney. Going back to my point about, I remember sort of just what I thought was a groundbreaking movement for the Paralympics back in Sydney. But I do remember sort of Australia was on such a high after Sydney that Monday afterwards almost felt like a bit of a hangover. You're like, you were sad that it was over, but at the same time, you're like, all right, well, 7 years of hard work, time to get cleaning this up. But then all of a sudden, the Paralympics are on, and the party sort of came back, and then it was just like, it was a different vibe. So I totally understand the way you explain that. Absolutely.
When you walk through, and have you been up into Whistler? Are you familiar with the village?
I think I might be the only Australian, Michael, who's not been to Whistler. When I lived there, because it was during COVID, so I actually never really got to go much outside there.
So you're walking through a winter village, buildings on the side, bars and restaurants everywhere. And during the Paralympics, you could walk a little more freer. And all of a sudden you'd get to the bottom of the chairlift and you'd see a leg, a chair, a crutch. Where people would take their skis and put them on the racks, you'd see limbs. You want to talk about an eye-opening experience for anyone who never experienced parasport? Yeah. That does it.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's the way you put that's absolutely fascinating. I don't even really know where to ask a question on all of your events and all your achievements and everything. I might just go with a standard question, which I'm sure you've answered plenty of times. But of all the Paralympic medals you won, of all the races you competed in at that level, is there one that you do put higher than the other ones? Is sort of your favorite race that you did have at the Paralympics?
I have 2 from Korea and 2 from Spain.
Okay.
The 2 from Korea that are embedded, and Spain more so, but the 2 in Korea, I'd swam 9 events, and one, I never had the delusion of going, I'm going to win everything. I was going just to swim, and I qualified and we had a couple of relays. And as I won a race or won a second or won a third, you'd think it would get easier, 3 down, 6 to go. The angst and stress and excitement and fatigue increases exponentially, because as one goes by, more pressure comes to win the next. So it's building and building and building. And again, the 200 IM or the 400, every time a race came and went, there was more pressure on the next one. And races that you don't have control over are relays. And relays are some of the toughest races for me ever. The 2 relays that we did, one, I was the anchor. It was a 4x100 free, and we were behind just about 280 meters before the 300 meter, and I took over. And I remember seeing the Americans go, and I remember seeing back then the Russian team going. And looking at the end of the pool, figuring out how I was going to get to the end and back before those 2 could finish.
Wow.
That's one that because I had no control on what happened in the first 300 meters. The last one and the other relay in that was the 4x1 medley, and I was the backstroker. So I had to start. So I got out in front, but then I had to leave it up to my teammates. And it is tough to rely on somebody else. So being the anchor, thinking, can I do this, versus being the first, I've done my part, I now just have to sit back and cheer. Those 2 have stayed with me my whole life, because it's the perception of being in control and having none of it, and learning to rely on other people and having the confidence that they've done the same type of work you did to get us to where we need to be. I don't know how people do team sports. I think I would crumble.
I was about to say, it's predominantly an individual sport, obviously, and then all of a sudden what an incredible way of looking at that, because it's particularly leading off, because I guess your job is to put the team in as best position as possible, but then from that point on, you're on the blocks, you're catching your breath, but you've then got 300 meters worth of, come on, guys, swim faster. Like, I gave you a lead. What the hell are you doing?
And I was trying to think, I was on the younger side of that team, of the relay team. And all of a sudden I'm wanting to start to coach these other swimmers a minute and 10 before they're going to swim. Like, there's no time for coaching there. So anyways, those 2. The 2 races that really resonate with me are the last 2 races I swam in my para career. They were in Spain. This is a tough one. The second to last race, I lost. You win or you lose, and I lost. And the hard part for me, even sitting here today, I get a little teary-eyed, is I didn't lose necessarily because I was slower than Noel. I lost because I swam his race, not mine. And you want to talk about getting inside your own head. 200 backstroke, I'm a faster backstroke. I'm in the middle lane. Back then, I could even split, meaning my first and my second 100 were pretty close to the same speed. I had a few other things going on. I took off 4 lengths of the pool, and he went out fast. And he's not known for going out fast, and he's ahead of me. And all of a sudden, I get this goofy grin, I'm sure on my face, saying, let him go. I'll catch him later. Not good. So the first 50 goes, and he's a half body length. We flip at the 50. We're coming back into the 100. And the feet now, I can see a little bit of splashing up beside my head, which means he's a body length ahead. And again, I'm thinking, it's okay. He'll die. I'll catch him. We flip at the 100. I turn the jet engines on. I'm starting to roll. My shoulders are going. My feet are bubbling up. I'm charging. And I can't catch him. So we flip at the 150. I'm staying underwater. I come up. My lungs are burning. And I'm thinking, I'm getting there, but I'm going to run out of pool. And sure enough, we hit the wall. He out touches me. And I mean, I can tell that story in a 20-minute version. It wasn't the best time. It was for him. It wasn't for me. It's the first race I had lost in 13 races in Paralympic. Like it almost just destroyed my psyche because of the lack of confidence I had. And it wasn't because I was slower and he outclassed me. It's because I got in my own head and I lost. Now, losing is coming second because you win or you lose. So it wasn't a medal, sure. But that medal sits in the top drawer to this day. And every day I open that drawer, I look at that medal, remembering what happens when you focus on someone else more than yourself.
I mean, vividly the way you describe that, I absolutely love that. But what an incredible story to kind of hear that, which I've got to ask the question then. So at that moment when you say, oh, I'll get him later, you're getting into his race. So standard in the 12 other races that you had won prior to that, is the mentality more so, I don't care about anyone else around me, I know what I've got to do, and you're just focusing purely on yourself? Is that sort of what you would reflect on and change if that's what I'm reading that into?
And it's not even I don't care. I was completely unaware, and I love to race. I detest losing more than I enjoy winning. So it was all about the race and to be the first one to the wall. So as soon as I started to cloud my thought process, my training, my routine into something different, I deviated from the plan. I am, as I said, I'm 5'5". I'm not a huge stalking, specimen of a human being, but I'm very headstrong. And I played a game and lost.
Was there any part, going back to when you were saying that around then is maybe when you were thinking you were, plateauing, that's kind of what led you to not continue. But did any part of that loss lead you into a thought of, I've got to come back in 4 years' time and get this gold back?
That loss led me to say, I'm going to come back tomorrow in a 200 IM. And it wasn't, I'm not going to lose. It's, I am going to win. 24 hours later, 200 IM, 1 length each stroke. I get up on a block. I'm kind of doing this, crack the knuckles, shake the arms. I'm on the block. There's about 10,000 people down the sides. I had family in the stands. My bride at the time, my wife now, but we just got married. She was in the stands. My mom, my sister. I get up there and everything is just like my screen. It's blurry. All I'm looking at is my lane. And the same guy is about 2 lanes over from me, didn't even register. So I stand up for 200 IM. I'm ready. Big breath. Everybody gets announced. You drop all your stuff in your bucket. You stand up there and this is already in my head, likely my last race. And I'm thinking, fly back, breath free. I've got it all. I'm ready. Before I knew it, bang, this gun had gone. I was in the water. I'm coming up about 3-4 meters past the flags, and I'm screaming. I'm a butterfly. Nothing better than fresh water. I'm coming. The shoulders are coming up. The chest is coming up. The hips are nice and high. The feet are fluttering the way they should. Arms are coming in. I'm reaching. I am on top of the world. I hit the wall, and I turn around. I push off, and there's a big scoreboard at that end of the pool. Now, I can't see it, but I know it's there. I'm starting to go in backstroke, and I'm starting to bubble. And I don't think I've ever swam this well before. And when you swim well, it never hurts. There is no pain. There's no fatigue. You just go. The guy that beat me was a breaststroker. The guy that beat me the day before. And again, the backstroke was both of our off events. So I'm coming into the 100 meters. I hit, I turn, I flip under, I push out. And as I'm going to do my underwater pull, his body's still going in. Now, wow. I am somewhere between a really bad and a horrible breaststroker. So I come up, and all I know is I have to get to the wall first. So I'm nice and high, I'm squeezing everything in, and the legs are coming. And I start to feel this freight train behind me. And this freight train is getting closer and closer and closer. And again, it's like, focus on your race. And then you see the splash coming from the side. It's like full. So I had to keep reminding myself in a 50-meter span, about 34 seconds, 30, something like that, of breaststroke, I'm going in, and I'm just looking at the wall. As I come into the wall, I'm purposely turning his way because I got to know where he is. And as I turned, I looked. He was turning, and he was looking. This is not a good scenario. We push off the wall, hold your breath, kick as far as you can. You come up. Now things are starting to tighten up. Your arms aren't quite as long as they should be. The bubbles are behind you. You're leaning. You're not breathing. You're trying to get in there, and you're charging. We're beside each other, and it's ramping up, and it's coming in. And as we went to reach for the wall, I got to remember this now, with my left hand, and as far as I could go, and he was on my left. And as we hit the wall, the crash of water came over top of us. We're grabbing on, we're huffing, we're grabbing our air. We swing around to look at the big clock at the end. Neither one of us, again, can see it. We don't know who's won.
Wow.
We have no idea. The crowd's making a ton of noise. The rest of the swimmers come in. We're hunched on the blocks, and we're looking at each other. And we're just staring. And our eyes kind of met. Goggles came off. And he looks at me, and he says, he knew I had won because he reached with the same arm, and he saw me hit the wall before he did.
Wow.
Wow. Now I'm elated. I go jump out of the pool. I can't get out. I fall back in. I got to swim to the side. We kind of do the hug and we get out. It was a little bit of redemption. And it wasn't redemption because I beat Noel. I remember him. It was redemption that I could still swim my race. And it was only 24 hours. But it regained the confidence, and it was the absolutely best way to end the race I lost, the race I won, silver medal, a gold medal, standing on the platform, seeing the Canadian flag going up. Oh, Canada's playing. I'm kind of biting on the medal, big smile on my face. But when you ask what are the races that stick out, really those last two. And both of those medals stay in my top drawer. I'm 55 years old. They're still there, and I still remember what happened each day.
What? I just want you on the show every week, Michael, to explain things, because that is the best. I've done more than 250 interviews on this show, and that is the best I've ever heard somebody describe there. But that even got me a little bit teary. That was absolutely incredible. But I love just that turnaround, and we always ask what our athletes on the show with medals do with their medals, but I love kind of having that story of that they're in your drawer, like the two there that matter to you most are there. I mean, I don't think you needed to go to Atlanta. That was, but what a way to end. Not bad at all.
Yeah. I came back. I did swim a little bit after that, and I was finishing university. I was on a co-op, so half work, half school, and I walked on the pool deck. Ron Jacks, one of the most amazing swim coaches, he was on or put someone on every Olympic team, I think from 1968 up until 2 cycles ago. Just he's a personality without a doubt. I walked on the pool deck in a suit. I looked at Ron. He looked at me. He said, "Time." I said, "Yeah." He says, "Okay," and that was the end of it.
What?
That was it. Done.
I mean, I look at it in today's lens, Michael, that if you were in Paris and you won your 18th gold medal, your 21st medal, you know, in a couple of weeks' time in Paris, and that was the end of your career, you know, you're a household name. Everyone in Canada knows who you are. You're revered. You're being celebrated. You touched on sort of the attention that you were getting a little bit after Seoul and everything along those lines, but was that attention still coming from Barcelona, like, after that? Like, were the Paralympics that level in Canada at the time where you would come home with all these medals, I'm retiring, and this is going to be front page news, you know, that you are hanging up the goggles after this esteemed career?
I was at the University of Victoria, so I swam my uni days, and there's a circle of excellence, which is their top swimmers throughout the years. And there's a banner that's about the same size as I stand in the pool. My kids have finished uni. One of the friends of the kids, actually it was my son's girlfriend, went to the same university and would take people to show them the banner that hangs in the UVic pool.
Wow.
So there's a whole nother generation that is, the kids tell the stories, and they grew up. I mean, we had high expectations. We've got 3 boys. You know, you get to be humble. You get to earn the right to smile in the house. You get to cheer everybody on. There's all these the kind of unwritten rules that if you're coming through as an Edgson, you better perform as well as you can perform and be humble about it. It's just the way we are. But when that generation knows as much of my career, and their friends know, and my children tell the story, it just gives you goosebumps. The other thing is accolades come about 20 years after you retire or more. So, you know, the Terry Fox Sports Hall of Fame, Canada Sports Hall of Fame, the BC, they all start to come after, and it just rejuvenates because you're looking at other people coming through or you're being celebrated. You talked about having Donovan Bailey on the show. Donnie said something that I had never thought of. We were at a function in Toronto years ago, and we're talking about being the fastest man and really winning that, and then getting knocked off the podium because somebody's quicker. And what he said is what most people don't realize is you're not being replaced. Somebody is joining your group.
He said that on this show. He said a very similar thing. Yeah.
And that was probably 12 years ago that when I was with him, we were talking about it. And it resonates. It is, you can feel like you've been knocked off, or you can feel like someone's coming in to join you.
Well,
I know which one I think.
I think Colin, when he introduced him the second time he was on the show, sort of alluded to, it's kind of almost like if you're the president or the prime minister, right? You might not be the prime minister 20 years after you were the prime minister, but you're still going to be entering a room, Mr. Prime Minister, Madam Prime Minister. You know, it's a title that always has. It's like once an Olympian, always Olympian. Once a Paralympian, always a Paralympian. Like there's no such thing as on the show today, former Paralympian, Michael. It's like no, you are a Paralympian. It doesn't ever leave your name. Which, I mean, that's what I sort of alluded to obviously at the beginning. I mean, so many Hall of Fames that you sort of you get added to. The one actually though that I don't know, maybe this is the question that no one's ever asked you before. Hopefully,
bring it on.
Hopefully, after you retire, 92, obviously that's your last Olympics. But at that same Olympics, the first Olympics of Chantal Petitclerc, who has gone on to tie the amount of medals that you have won at the Paralympics of 21. Was there a competitiveness to you that followed her career, that maybe you saw her getting closer and closer to your medal? I know you're a humble man, Michael, but like, was there any part of you that when she got to Beijing and didn't get 22, that you were like, yes, I've got more gold than her. Technically, I'm more successful.
So I've known Chantal Petitclerc since we traveled. I want to go back as early as I want to say 1990.
Right. Wow.
So I've known her for a very long time. Track athlete pool, different. Disabilities were different, all the rest. I would celebrate her getting ahead of me because it means somebody's eclipsed it and gone. However, Benoit Hewitt, a great Canadian swimmer. Admittedly, I watched Ben's every swim to the tail end to see whether or not he was going to eclipse or not. And a different environment, different point in time, different level of competitiveness and speed. There was a whole bunch of different things between Ben and I. So Chantel, woohoo. Ben, I'm like, I was troubled by it because I want people to succeed.
Yeah.
I want to succeed. And if somebody does it better than I did it, good on them.
And records are meant to be broken at the end of the day, right?
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely. They should be.
Did you ever think of getting into politics like Chantel at all? Or
Chantel's in our Senate. It's the Senate process is an interesting one where there's so many by province, and when a seat comes back, Nancy Green was another one. Minister Carla Qualtrough, our Minister of Sport, who is a friend, got into the politics, and her and I talk quite often. Actually, she only lives 10 minutes away from here, and I don't know if I could survive in that political realm. And again, it's a team sport, running a country, responsible. I'm really good at being responsible for me.
Well, it's interesting. Our most decorated Paralympian in Australia, Matthew Cowdery, is a politician now too. So it must be something in the water when it comes to most decorated Paralympians. They want to go and be politicians potentially. So
I think about Vancouverton. It was an MP. I think there is name recognition, and depending on how quick that you go from the front page of the paper to the political realm, it may get your foot in the door. It's a different thing to get. So to me, if you're going to be a Paralympian going into politics, the sign of success is getting reelected, not elected.
One of my favorite Winter Olympians in this country, Australia's first ever individual Winter Olympian back in Nagano, Zali Stegel, an alpine skier. She won bronze, and we got her on. I fanboyed out. I don't fanboy out often in this show, but I did way back when we started. Got her on the show. Anyway, she, not long after that, got into politics, and now she's a fairly successful independent MP here in our federal parliament. So I don't know, something, the name recognition might help. But I think more people, in this country realize Ali said was a politician and forget that she's a great Winter Olympian in this country. So,
Yeah. I've always thought it's interesting watching the athletes that can do winter and summer.
Oh, yeah.
Skiing and cycling. There's a few speed skating and velodromes, like the short track. Those individuals are fantastic.
It's Clara Hughes, right? Who's is she one of, or not the only athlete in at least the Olympics to medal in? But I know there's multiple in the Paralympics, but
I think she's the only one, and it's just extraordinary.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's sort of going back to what we're talking about swimming, about how in Canada it's not quite what it is in Australia, but it's the same here in Australia with our winter sports. And I'm a huge, I love the Summer Olympics and the Paralympics, don't get me wrong, but if you force my hand, I'm a winter fanboy because we just don't have those sports in Australia. So, it fascinates me, the Winter Olympics and Paralympics.
I look at gymnastics. I think gymnastics is an unbelievable sport. One of our sons judges nationally on it and was an athlete, and watching the things and the dexterity and the different things between rings or vault or floor. I love watching gymnastics, and I can watch both men's and women's both because there are just outstanding. The pool, you've got to know swimming to get swimming.
There are some sports like that, isn't it, where it's kind of like, I mean, we get a lot of athletes on this show from, sports that sadly, doesn't matter if it's summer or winter, don't really get attention outside of an Olympic cycle. And all countries have that, obviously there are sports in Canada that, aren't getting attention until an Olympics or a Paralympics. But it's, the stories and we all become experts every 4 years, don't we, Michael? We always go I absolutely know in gymnastics, she totally should have gotten a 10. But what are you talking about?
What gets me is the sports that we watch during those times that we would never watch.
Exactly.
Horse jumping, dressage, pistol shooting at Commonwealths.
Yep.
These are not sports I would turn the channel on. But during the Olympics and Paralympics, I want to watch archery.
Yeah, I'm completely the same. I'm the biggest in summer games. I love handball and modern pentathlon. Am I watching handball and modern pentathlon for 3.5 years? No. Every fourth year, I'm on board.
Yes.
So, 100% with you.
You said something a little while ago, and again, please be my fact checker. We talked about, is there a point in time where you diverge between Paralympic and Olympic sport? To put some context behind that, I believe it was Beijing. The classification I compete in, so visually impaired but not blind, the men's 1500 on the track. The top two, I believe three at the Paralympics were faster than the winning time in the Olympics in the same event.
Wow.
Now, to put some context behind it, the 1500 is an incredibly tactical race.
Mm-hmm.
You don't just get out and run your fastest and you die like a pig on the way back. The tacticians, and you can slow a race down, you can speed it up. Do you have a kick? Where is it all at? And again, please be a fact checker for me, but I'm pretty sure the category that the two or three top male 1500 runners were faster than the gold medal at the Olympics.
It's something off the top of my head. I don't know, Michael, but I don't doubt that in one. I'm sure a quick Google search could confirm that. But that's fascinating. That's incredible. I didn't know that. Wow.
One of the neatest things I think that the different countries have done, and I tip my hat to the UK, is if the town an athlete came from or lives in won a gold medal,
mm-hmm.
their mailbox was painted gold.
Yep.
I think that is just one of the things. In the New Zealanders, and I'm very aware of where you're sitting and to whom I'm speaking with, when you become an All Black, your license plate is the number of which you became an All Black, not your jersey number. You were the 267th All Black.
Yeah.
That is your license plate on your vehicle.
I know in Australia we do, which they don't do for the Paralympics, which they should, but for the Olympics, if you win a gold medal, you get a stamp. So if you're an Australian Olympic champion, you are on a stamp the next day. So
that would be something else. But there are recognitions like that. You mentioned at the top of the show, the Stanley Cup Finals. We're still watching ice hockey tonight. There's a game between the Edmonton Oilers. I
was going to ask you about that, but I didn't want to date this too much. But we'll get back to that. Keep. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah, we can do that. So, and we'll deal with that. Paul Coffey, a well-renowned Edmonton Oilers defenseman, is actually behind the bench coaching. And we're at a banquet, and he's talking about the difference between amateur sport and professional sport. And I remember Paul saying, I can't believe the amount of work that amateur athletes put in purely for the love of the sport, purely for the love of the game. Mm-hmm. He said, I loved hockey, loved hockey, but I was also paid well to play a game. Amateur athletes aren't salaried per se. I mean, there's different incentives depending on the country and how you tied in, but it is amateur sport.
Yeah.
And athletes are doing this purely for the love of it.
And that's what the overarching theme on this show, Michael, is that the stories that are told to me by our guests. And I always often use the example of, I love hearing from an athlete who, say they've been to one Olympics, they didn't medal, but say they got 27th, but they put their absolute heart and sleeve out there onto the course or the event, and they left with a smile on their face, and I am over the moon. I then get a guest on who gets a gold medal, world record, greatest in the world, leaves with a smile on their face, whatever. That's what I love. I love the fact that that's what an event like the Olympics or the Paralympics can do is, the majority of these athletes are amateur. They're not professionals doing this, 24/7, getting paid high bucks sponsorship. They're having to raise the funds themselves. All of this sort of stuff, we see it often, but you can still have that same level of achievement, satisfaction, everything, whether you win a gold or finish 27th. It just depends on you can win a gold medal and be disappointed, things like that.
And I don't think people understand that.
Yeah.
Most of us, if we do a best time and come 22nd, there is something to celebrate there. You can win a gold medal and not have a best time, and you can be disappointed.
Yeah.
So it's that intrinsic motivation on what gets you going. I say I dislike losing more than I like winning. You got to learn to kind of win with grace and lose with poise. Mm-hmm. There's a cultural innate ability for people to accept a result that they had control in.
Great. Niki Lauda, Formula One driver, famously said that you learn more from losing than you do from winning. So
every time.
Yeah, exactly.
Every time.
I just to date this episode, you brought up I see the score of Game 5 tonight. So we're recording this Game 5 of the Stanley Cup Finals. Are you a Canucks guy coming from that part of the country, or?
I'm hockey's a little bit like watching the Olympics. I watch during the playoffs.
Right.
Do I know local players? Absolutely. I enjoy Edmonton because it's kind of the World Junior team, and there's a bunch of folks or guys that we watch in the World Juniors, which is the highlight of the hockey season for me. If I had to pick, Edmonton over Florida, I'm going Edmonton the whole way. They're in tough. They were down 3-1.
3-0.
3-0. You're right. They came back. So, and again, we're dating the show. I want to be
by the time we listen
that.
to this, they've come back from 3-0 and won the cup. For all we know, they've obviously 3-2 at the
that
moment.
Could happen.
But
that could happen.
As somebody, this is where I'm so torn this year. Is that I actually have two teams. I have an American and a Canadian team. But if there's a Canadian team in the finals, it doesn't matter who they are. Mostly, I will go for them because I want to see them win the cup. Given my Canadian team are the Calgary Flames, I cannot go for Edmonton right now. So sorry, Canada.
No, you can't.
I can't do it.
Those two can. There's Ron McLean, who's a hockey personality, is saying right now, let's cheer like we've never cheered before. We cheer against each other all year. And you see an Edmonton Oiler and a Flame, and they're kind of trying to bump fists or shake hands, and it's actually pretty good.
Yeah.
However, if you look at the Vancouver Canucks roster and you look at the Florida roster, I'm pretty sure there's more Canadians playing stateside than there is Canadians on the Canucks team right now.
I think there wasn't there a stat that of the last 30 years that Canada haven't won the Stanley Cup, that still like 90% of the players are Canadian. Maybe not 90, but like it's like, I remember when the Raptors won the NBA championship, the Americans did the opposite. They were like, oh, just because you're a Canadian team, everyone but one player is American, so it doesn't count. I love that back and forth. I want to wrap up with these get to know you questions, but two quick things I want to just touch on Michael. First of all, we're about to see the Paralympics. Just a general thought overview. Can you give us Team Canada, particularly in the swimming, like how do you feel the expectations are for Team Canada going into the Paris Paralympics?
We're strong. We are ready to go. I think that the preparation, the trials have gone really well, and they've been a really solid indicator of where we're coming through. The women are looking fantastic. We've got a couple of male swimmers, a small club out of Qualicum Beach of all places, a phenomenal coach, and she's coaching her brother. We're ready to get there. We're ready to race. I am excited to see the results. We've got a couple athletes returning. One was injured 4 years ago and is coming back through. So the team is looking good. We're excited.
Great. Good to hear it. The other one I just really wanted to touch on, you worked at the Commonwealth Games in 1994. Now, when I moved to Canada, my prior knowledge of Victoria purely was from 1994. I knew it as the Commonwealth Games city, and I worked as a sort of a podcast host journalist while I was there. And one of my projects, which I sadly never got to finish, was I was writing a big piece on the Commonwealth Games. So I was doing a lot of interviews, a lot of, contact with people. And I loved learning about the history of it. I visited the pool, and as an Australian, I think Kieran Perkins, all the iconic moments of that. And that's what I was going to ask you, because that was your job, wasn't it? You were responsible for kind of dictating swimmers. So I was going to ask you about Kieran. Like, do you remember Kieran? And talk to me about 94 and the Commonwealth Games. Long way to ask a simple question, Michael.
Kieran set a world record to the foot in the 800 on the way out of his 15. And we're in Sandwich Commonwealth Pool. The pool was ready. It was a good pool. It was under budget and ahead of time. We're sitting there and we're watching the 1500 and we're ready. Like this could happen. And when you watched him set the world record to the foot, so he's turned, not just reached it, he's turned and set a record. The place went crazy. I remember that swim over any other swim at that event.
It's peak Commonwealth. To me, like, the Commonwealth Games aren't what they used to be, but when I think of just growing up watching the Commonwealth Games, that's peak Commonwealth Games for me. I don't think I've ever experienced, and I worked at the Gold Coast Commonwealth Games, so I've experienced one in person, but I don't ever feel the Commonwealth Games, to me as a spectator, ever reached the highs that they did in 1994.
Yeah, and you know what, it was I was responsible for the field of play, reported to Dr. Peter Rizzoli, who was my university coach. We had a phenomenal time. For me, the second highlight is seeing Mark Tewksbury and Alex Bauman. They brought them in to be part of the Canadian swim team on the deck. So now you're looking at two Canadian legends who are there purely as a motivation, as a confidence builder. A swim meet in our own backyard. So I swim better away from home. And I don't know if it's distractions, excitement, travel, hotel. I don't know what it is. But the swim meet was phenomenal. Just the whole event. The other thing that I remember from that pool is I had met Wilt Chamberlain.
Wow.
A basketball player. And they were fussing about trying to get him from one venue to another. And they came to me and I'm like, why do I care? Like, I don't know who this person is, but they're not on my list of people I need to take care of. And I remember walking up the stairs at the pool and I turned around and I looked into Wilt's belt buckle and the head slowly went up. There wasn't security, but it was athletic. It was fast swimming. It was one of the best events I ever went to, and I didn't even compete at.
It's this is why I love it when we say get somebody else from a Commonwealth nation on the show where we can talk a little bit about it, because it's just, I think it's just fun to talk about the Commonwealth Games, and this is where it's kind of sad where we're sitting at right now, where at least at the time we're recording this, hopefully maybe by the time we air this we get a little bit more clarity about what happens in 2026. And as an Australian, again, I want to formally apologise for the shit show that came with that, but I hope it's an event that, while it may not be on the level it was 30 years ago, that it still can stay, because there are few and far between Olympic cycles for athletes to compete in kind of these regional type games. So obviously we hope it. We hope it. And Canada needs them back. Like, come on, it hasn't been there since 94. I know Hamilton wants it in 2030 for the centenary, but come on, Canada, get the Games back.
Yeah. We need them back. It's exciting. It's a great stepping. And I want to say it's not a world championships because the qualifying time, it's a deeper field. No, we want them back. I think we need them back. Yeah. And any excuse we can come up with to get in and get that group together and watch them compete, I'm in.
Exactly. And as I always say on this show, as an Australian, we love them because we now know how America feels at the Olympics. You wake up and you're like, oh, I only won 20 gold today. What a slow day. Rather than, we won a bronze at the Olympics. Woo! Like, it's that fun. We like that dominance, right? So that's what we like. Michael, we wrap up every interview. Set of get to know yourself questions. As always, these are a set of questions that were given to Team Canada athletes ahead of the Rio and the Pyeongchang Games. They haven't sadly done it since Pyeongchang. So if you've got any friends on the Canadian Olympic Committee, can you please ask them to bring this back for LA or Milan even? Like,
I can send a note today on that one for you.
Please do. Or at least if the Olympics don't want to do it, the Paralympics. Like, just somebody brings these questions back because we love them. There is always the option to draw. You don't have to. There is they gave the athletes the option. They could draw a picture of themselves, a teammate. But if you don't like to draw, don't worry about it. Just
bring it on.
Ignore it. First question I'm going to ask you, the greatest, and I'm going to make this the greatest Paralympian of all time to you is?
Trisha Zorn. First decorated. What was really neat about Trish and swimming with her, thank you, and growing up, is her ability to be so diverse and race in so many disciplines over such a huge amount of time. So Trish Zorn is probably my top. Yep.
She's. I think the fact that if you can have someone who leaves an event like the Paralympics with 55 freaking medals, that I don't get why she isn't. I mean, I know she's talked about it. I'm not saying she's not, but like, she's not in the same conversation often as Michael Phelps, which is a travesty because, I mean, double the medals. And she's such an icon that to me, it baffles me that not a lot of people are more aware of her.
Yeah. And part of it too, again, there's a little bit of context, is the earlier you competed, the more shallow the talent. And I don't want to take anything away. So longevity towards the end of a career, it was getting fast and competitive. Early on, a little bit less. There just wasn't the depth and breadth of the field. but nor was it training, nor was access, nor was funding or anything else. So I think it goes with a little bit. But I would say up there, Trish, absolutely. I remember traveling. I remember competing. I remember like I knew her. She would be one of those. I would also say no. I'm leaving it at Trish.
Okay, leave it at Trish. All right, I respect that answer. I'm glad. The first Olympics or Paralympics that you ever remember watching was?
I'm going to twist this one on you.
Okay.
78 Commonwealths.
Okay, I like that answer. All right.
Bill Sawchuk, Graham Smith, Big Teddy Bear, Cowboy Hat. Family was living in Thunder Bay. Bill Sawchuk started swimming, I think around age 15 or 16, and made a Commonwealth teams in 78, 2 years later. That's the first event I remember watching Olympics, Commonwealth, that realm. It's a shout out to the Commonwealth Games. That would be my first memory. 80 was a boycott. 84, certainly. Carl Lewis. I mean, some of the UK swimmers, breaststroker, Victor Davis, Alex Bauman, all those guys. And by then I was in the sport. But earliest memory in 1978.
Okay, I'm gonna try and test my memory here because my years of the Commonwealth Games get a little bit blended versus the Olympics. Yep. I know 82 was Brisbane. 78 was that Edmonton? Or where were the 78? Was that Edmonton Commonwealth Games, or am I going a bit too late?
No, it may have been. I don't know.
I'm going to Google this because this is annoying me, right? I don't usually do this live on air, but it is annoying me.
I've got
they were in Edmonton. Oh, yes. Come on. Get on board with it. Oh, my knowledge. Second guess myself, Michael. We got there.
I think I remember those because my family moved to Thunder Bay, Ontario for 2 years, and that's where Bill Sawchuk is from. Right. So it was a big deal.
It's interesting because back to Victoria Commonwealth Games, first Olympics, I vividly remember watching Barcelona, but I was 5. So it was kind of you knew what they were, but you don't. I also often will say that the Commonwealth Games in 94 was the real first multi-sport event that I got hooked on. So that when Atlanta rolled around, I was like, wow, I love it. And we obviously at that point in Australia, we knew Sydney was happening in 2000. So, things like that. Your favorite ice cream flavor is?
I hesitate because it's odd and unique and different.
Perfect.
It is a melon flavor out of Sweden. It is soft ice cream. It is the best, almost a gelato, but it's not. So it's a melon flavored soft ice cream out of Sweden.
It's the most specific answer we've ever gotten, Mark, and I love it.
Well, everyone's a chocolate, chocolate mint, none of that. You got to go. I would go there just for the ice cream.
Wow. And I love the fact that you're nailing it down to the location. It's like this.
Oh, I know the amusement park I got it at. I was at a swim meet in, I want to say it was Melmo.
Right. Yep.
Yep. Absolutely. I remember it.
Wow.
Best ever.
You're such a good storyteller. Please come on every single week. This is so good. I love it. If you were a baseball player, what would your walk-up music be?
Oh, oops, I did it again.
Yes. Anything Britney I love, but what a great
absolutely.
answer. I love that. Yeah. In a movie about your life, who would play you?
Oh.
Okay. I've got one for you looking at you. You answer first, but then I'm going to give you an answer after you answer.
If I'm looking for somebody that I think if I was a little skinnier that I would look like, it would be Kurt Browning.
Okay, yep.
But Kurt's older than me, so that's not going to work. I've got one of we have 3 boys and a set of twins in there. And if you put me smack dab in the middle of Connor and Liam, I think we could probably morph into something that might resemble and have the same spark and attitude and everything else. I think my set of twins could capture it.
Okay, I like that. I was going to go for Dean Norris, if you know who that is. If you watch Breaking Bad, you watch Breaking Bad, Hank?
I'll take that.
Yeah.
Done. Tick.
I think Dean could pull it off. So Dean, if you're listening, let's get talking. it might be the answer you answered for your ice cream. I don't know. But your guilty pleasure snack is?
Potato chips.
Potato chips, yes. Ketchup?
Potato
Are you
chips?
so Canadian you go ketchup?
Oh, no.
No?
See, ketchup's out. Pickles are out. Probably all dressed.
Yes, yep.
Rippled.
Yep.
And the challenge and the problem with potato chips is if I open a bag, I'll eat the bag. And whether the bag is a single serving or a king size, it's all going down.
Which the thing that fascinates me, and it's a North American thing because I think you guys get it from America, is that your small bag of potato chips is generally what we sell as like a large bag here. We have like little, very small individual size ones in Australia, which when I lived in Canada and the States, I'm like, where are just the little bags? And people looked at me and go like, they are the little bags. I'm like, they're not little. They're huge.
You know what we'd call that? We would call that a why bother.
Yeah, exactly.
I like that potato chips. That's good.
Yeah, it's potato chips to me are an interesting one. I'm not opposed to potato chips, but I get bored of them halfway through a packet. I just kind of like, I'm done with these. I'll come back to them later. So I'm kind of the opposite of you in that. But I do like Doritos. Doritos are probably my favorite.
It's a little bit like a wine stopper on a bottle of wine. I don't know what they're for.
To me, it's ice cream. I'm ice cream. I can't stop eating ice cream. Once love it. The most recent TV show that you binge watched is?
I don't want to admit to it.
Oh,
you ready?
Now you have to answer it. Go for it.
Bridgerton.
Okay. Are you like hooked? Because I've got my friend. She's like literally, I think, watched it twice in the last week because she's that obsessed with it. Are you on that level?
We were so good, and we're on a Welcome to Wrexham trip, and we've got tickets. They're playing the Whitecaps. We're ready to go.
Aren't they? That's right, yeah.
So we're binge watching that, and then Bridgerton dropped, and I lost control of the remote, and that was the end of it.
Wow, far out. Okay.
Yeah.
Can't say I've seen it, but I've heard it's good. So,
Welcome to Wrexham is a very British version of Ted Lasso. If you're familiar, except there's a whole lot of colorful language that comes in Wales.
Fit right in this part of the world. Yeah. Again, dating this episode, obviously, but I mean, what is it like with Wrexham coming to Vancouver to play the Whitecaps? Is it a big deal there at the moment?
Yeah, they just came off a little bit of a disappointment where they brought in, and I'm going to be embarrassed because I won't remember who was supposed to come and play out of the U.S. They came up and they didn't bring their star player, and everybody was booing and a little upset. Huge crowd. I think, quite honestly, it's Ryan Reynolds that's going to be the draw, and people are going to come, and really hoping he shows up because he'll be the highlight of the show.
It's home city, right? He has to show up. Like, he's where he's from, isn't he? So come on.
Yes.
Come on, Ryan. What are you doing?
Come on, sure.
What is your biggest fear in life? Here's a deep question.
I know what it was. So I'll tell you what it was, and then we'll figure out if there's an is.
Okay.
When I think of people from my past or current, I will make every effort I can to phone or see them. If they just cross my mind, and I'm not going to spend hours and days, but if I have the ability to find a phone number or track them down, I will go and speak to them because I don't ever want to think of someone and lose the opportunity to converse with them. So I will go out of my way to a small extent that whether it's youth growing up in different towns, a coach, a friend, a family member, I will track them down just to say hello. Used to be that I would not have that opportunity, and then I changed and grew and adopted and focused on other things. Now, it's hard to say. I'm unaware if I have any.
Okay.
I am incredibly fortunate, surprisingly content. I surround myself with people who I enjoy being around. I have got rid of people in my life that drag me down. Life is fantastic. Doesn't mean it's perfect, but it is pretty bloody amazing. And every day I'm excited.
So inspiring. Just keep talking, Mark. Seriously, the inspiration is coming in. I love it. I love it.
Yeah, we have so much control, and listening, Mel Robbins, and I'm sure my wife in the other room is giggling because I'm quoting Mel Robbins, who runs a podcast, talks a couple of weeks ago, listening to one of her, talks about things that people worry about that you have no control over, the weather. As much as we think we control the weather, people come to visit from Australia and they come to Vancouver and it rains every day. I can't control that. Lineups, traffic. These are not things in my control, so why would I ever fuss about them? So I'm aware, and don't get me wrong, I have my down days, my doom and gloom, my pity parties. I sometimes move to Pity City and want to buy a house and become mayor. They don't last very long because I don't have the patience or tolerance to live in that space.
I'm taking so much out of this, and I love that. I really, 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 really enjoy it. The last one I'll ask you then, Michael, what is one thing that you can't live without?
Okay, do you want the real answer or the sappy answer?
Go for both.
Peanut butter.
Mm-hmm.
Just, it's a staple, and I would probably die without it. I can have it with anything. Yeah, I can have a peanut butter sandwich while I make dinner because it's that time.
You had it for breakfast to spoil our little pre-conversation audio level test.
Breakfast, dinner, lunchtime, it's all good. Something I can't live without: community. And it's not even a big airy-fairy. I commute 45 minutes on a train going into work. I get to an office where I sit in my office and go to work. It's not a big interactive place. I need that social fix of the commute. Now, I don't drive, so I'm not in the stress of driving, but I'm on a bus into a train. It's 42 minutes from here to there. I need to be surrounded by people, whether I know them or not, because I feed off that energy. And I need it almost every single day.
Fantastic. Love both those answers. You can be doing that energy while eating your peanut butter. Like you can combine the two.
Because people frown at you. The peanut butter has an odor on the train and they throw things. It's similar to being on an airplane and somebody cracks open tuna fish. You can't do that. But you can think about it.
But those people are idiots, let's be honest, Michael. It's been an absolute pleasure, privilege. The words escape me of all the other superlatives I can say about what it's like to have you on this show, Michael. It's been such an honor to learn about your career and learn about so many great things, your storytelling abilities and everything along those lines. Please if you haven't already, write a book. You need to get all this down. There's so much out there that you can tell, but I really do appreciate your time on the show today to be able to share just a portion of so much that you've achieved in your life.
I'm flattered that you'd reach out. When I got the communication, I was apprehensive because I don't think I have a story to tell. I am who I am. And I'm always amazed that anyone would think having a conversation would be interesting, let alone enlightening in any manner. So I'm flattered. I'm humbled. And I don't tell my story very often. When I have someone who's interested, I love to tell it. So thank you for letting me kind of, as I said at the beginning, peel back that onion and share.